Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks for checking out another new episode of The Lager Line, again served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbox Brewing. I'm Ben Dubose, your host, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire, and contributor to Sports Talk 790, official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. As always, I'm joined by Paulo Alves, our co-host and producer out of Portugal. You can follow him on Twitter/X at Paulo Alves NBA, and me on there at Ben Dubose. So, as we chat late night on Thursday, April 24th, early Friday, April 25th for Paulo, the Rockets and Warriors are tied at a game apiece in their first-round playoff series. I mentioned the time off the top because we are still waiting for clarification as of our recording regarding the pelvic contusion suffered by Jimmy Butler. It took him out for most of Game 2. His status for Game 3 on Saturday night and future games of the series, not quite clear. We know he's a gamer. My personal expectation is that unless the MRI shows something really bad, he'll play. But as of our recording time, nothing has been confirmed on the Warriors' end. So that's why if you're listening to this Friday or Saturday before the game and you're wondering why the analysis sounds a little bit dated, we're still waiting for final clarification. I'm going to go into this thinking that he plays, if not in Game 3, certainly by Game 4. By the way, it's going to be very interesting. Next week, starting with Monday's Game 4, everything is going to be every other day. This first week, it's been spaced out, games Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Starting Monday, it's every other day for the remainder of the series. That could benefit a younger team with a little bit more depth like the Rockets. We'll just have to wait and see. And look, as far as this pod, there's a number of individual storylines we can get to. I think Jalen Green is certainly the headliner. He had a terrible Game 1 when the Rockets scored just 85 points and lost despite playing well defensively. Then he went out and was brilliant in Game 2, maybe his best game as a Rocket. 38 points, solid efficiency. Rockets won by 15. Even without Jimmy Butler, the Warriors still shot 40% on threes at high volume, and they still weren't even able to be close. That speaks to how good the Rockets can be with that level of defense if they have that version of Jalen Green. He went out there and bounced back from a bad Game 1 and was brilliant in Game 2. Alperen Sengun, very good in both games. Amen Thompson, hit or miss. He's had his moments, but foul trouble for the most part has prevented him from having the impact on this series that you would like. That's one of the low-hanging fruit for the Rockets moving forward. Hopefully, in these games out in the Bay, the Rockets are able to get a better version of Amen, and that sort of is the meat left on the bone for them. If you're the Warriors, you can point to not having Jimmy Butler for a lot of Game 2. The Rockets can point to not having the peak version of Amen Thompson for most of the first 2 games. And some of it probably, he's in just his second NBA season. This is his first playoff run. He's going to get his feet underneath him and get used to the playoff environment just as Jalen did between Game 1 and Game 2. It's not easy for these young guys. We can also talk about what the Rockets have done defensively to Steph Curry, which honestly I think has been pretty strong. Even though Steph has shot well from three-point range, to be expected, one of the greatest players of all time in the playoffs, they forced him into 6 turnovers in Game 2. They haven't given up a ton of open looks to at least his hot shooting teammates. Now, the second half of Game 2, we saw a little bit of that, the Rockets playing with their food, a little bit up 15, 20 points, and not really threatened. But for the most part, I think the Rockets' defense on Steph has been sound. He's made some tough shots. So lots of things we can get to in terms of individual storylines throughout this series, and I'm sure we will as we make our way through the pod. But for me, what I want to start, at least my analysis with, is the reality that everything we saw in the regular season is translating to the playoffs, and that's a really good feeling. Look, I'm not saying the Rockets are going to win this series because the Warriors currently have home court advantage. They did what they needed to do, took one of the 2 games in Houston. Now it's a best of 5, and the Rockets are going to have to win in San Francisco at least once if they want to win this series. So this is not me taking a victory lap because it is entirely possible that the Warriors can still win this series. And they're favored right now for a reason. And that game one loss was very frustrating. However, the way the two games went down, even in game one, which was so frustrating with all the energy in the building to see the Rockets offensively lay a dud, the process was fine. The energy was fine. They competed their butts off defensively. The Rockets have now played the Warriors 3 times this month. The Warriors have not gotten to 97 points a single time. For the season as a whole, we talked about this on the preview pod. The Warriors had the lowest offensive rating in the NBA if you extrapolated their performance against the Rockets for the season as a whole. So the defense is holding, the energy is there. Quite frankly, game one, Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet just couldn't make a shot. The Rockets also shot uncharacteristically poorly, just 55% on free throws. In game two, a lot of the issues corrected. They shot 80% on free throws. Jalen Green bounced back. And the Warriors basically had the same point total, mid-90s in both games. The Rockets just went from 85 in game one to 109 in game two. And so you had a very different outcome. And so for me, when I look at the collective, it's just a sense of relief that there's nothing about what we saw in the regular season that was fraudulent. Nothing has changed when we see teams dialing up, and Steve Kerr is a very good coach, Houston-specific game plans to attack Alperen Sengun or attack Jalen Green, whatever the case may be, or give more resources to defending those two guys on the offensive end of the court. Nothing has changed. In some ways, the Rockets have been even better. Maybe not for the two games as a whole, but certainly in moments. I think collectively we've seen the Ime Udoka system is certainly translating to the playoffs in terms of the defense. Not only has it held, it looks even better in a playoff environment where there's more physicality allowed. For me, as good as this season was, 52-30, number two in the West, you always have to worry a little bit when you're a team this young without much playoff experience. How is it going to translate? Is there going to be something about your formula or one or two of your key players that for one reason or another just doesn't translate to the playoffs? And I don't think we're seeing that at all. Even the game the Rockets lost, again, the process was good, the effort was good, everything was fine. They just couldn't make shots, and they're not a great team at doing that. That's been an issue at times throughout the entire season, and maybe it ends up costing them the series. Maybe a game that otherwise was very winnable, that game one at home, ends up being something they can't recover from in terms of can they get 4 wins against the Warriors? Time will tell. But in terms of the process, to me, there's nothing in terms of the lights being too bright, the team not being able to handle, or the environment just not being conducive to how they play. No, everything we saw over 82 games, and at least for me, when you see the type of leap the Rockets made this year from 41 wins to 52, number two in the West after being number 11 a year ago, there's always something in the back of your mind, at least for me, wondering, is it too much too soon? How much of this is real? Through two games, everything looks pretty real. They are meeting the moment. They are rising to the challenge, and that's not me saying they're for sure going to win this series, but I do think that there has to be at least some sense of relief that both in terms of individuals and the collective, there's nothing that seems alarming. They are meeting the moment. They are doing what needs to be done on the big stage, and I couldn't be prouder of this group. Those are my general thoughts, Paolo. What have your high-level thoughts been just about what we've seen at a collective level from the first two games? And then we'll get into some of the individual storylines a little bit later.
I'm 100% with you in the sense that there has not been a single thing happening that wasn't predictable. And it really feels like, and just as a general kind of, well, I know we'll talk about these guys individually, but it's obviously a small sample size, and obviously we're coming off of a big win, but it doesn't feel like guys are underperforming. I feel like the first game there were definitely some nervousness, especially earlier on in the game, and you could tell by basically everybody except for Alperen Sengun. I think even Jabari Smith, who didn't make a shot earlier on defense, was kind of hit or miss. But then, as the game progressed, I think guys got better, and I think last game, obviously Jalen is going to be the main storyline, but when you look at the game, it did really feel like the Rockets kind of took the foot off the gas a little bit in the second half. They were not playing with the same level of intensity. That's why the game kind of stayed kind of touch and go. But I don't think was because of lack of ability or because of nerves. It's just what this team has done in the regular season. It really felt like the same thing that the Rockets do in the regular season and against tougher teams. Um, and against everything in general, once the Rockets get a big lead, it often feels like, unless the shots are going in, that they kind of take the foot off the gas. And that's why the Jalen Green's performance was so important, because he was basically our go-to guy to keep us, kind of out of striking distance, I guess. That being
At
said,
arm's length was the phrase that I used. Go on.
yeah, that's right. I was kind of looking for the opposite of within striking distance.
So not in striking distance.
Exactly. Just the negative. Guys, bear with me. I stayed up until 6 a.m. last night. I got up at 8 a.m. to go to work, and I haven't slept since. So if I go
We sound
into
delirious. There's a reason for that. I'm pretty much in the same boat. I was up piling stories till 3 a.m. and my dog was whining to get fed by 7:45. So I get it. I
Jesus
get it.
Christ. Yeah. So that's what kind of like my overview. Going forward, kind of from a high level standpoint as well, I do think that obviously Jimmy Butler's injury is huge, because it allows us to just hone in on Steph, and if the other guys beat you, as long as they're not shooting open layups and open corner threes all day, you just tip your cap. But the other thing that I want to mention, and I wish I made this point. It's still early enough for me to make this point, but I wish I made this point a couple of pods ago when we were talking about matchups and you were talking about the importance of securing home court advantage. I was at the time, I didn't end up making the point, but I was going to make the point that I'm not even sure home court advantage is that big of a deal for us. I think maybe it was that big of a deal on the first series because, obviously there were nerves, and obviously having 2 games in a row at home kind of makes it easier for it not to snowball, right? If things went wrong the first game and then the second game, both of the games were away, that could have, snowballed, and 2-0 easily becomes 3-0, and that then see its series over. But I do think that, as we talked about on the preview of the series, that Jalen was, and the series and every series we're going to talk about this, that Jalen is the biggest kind of swing factor on these games. Like, if we know what we're going to get from mostly everyone, but this team struggles with half-court offense, and Jalen Green is the best source of half-court offense other than Alperen Sengun, but Alperen Sengun is going to get double teamed, right? And so for Jalen in specific, listen, I would probably take Jalen being at 100% his best self in exchange for everybody else being at 80%. That's how important he is, and how important what he brings when he's on is versus the other guys. That being said, what I mean by conclusion with this is that away, Jalen Green's just a much better, much more efficient player this season. Jalen on the road is actually a 44, 38, 83 split guy versus at home being a 41, 33, 80 split guy. So he's basically more efficient across the board. Although, the totals as far as, how many points he's scoring is basically the same, but he's much, much more efficient on the road. And so him being our biggest swing factor actually makes me more confident on the games on the road at Golden State than the ones at home. And so the way I kind of viewed the series is I always felt more confident on us playing at the Warriors. And so kind of when they took game 1, I was, obviously pissed, but to me it wasn't nearly as much or as big of a deal as it was most other people, because I kind of thought, well, they're kind of supposed to win this game, and if we can steal one at home in game 2, we're actually we get the reverse home court advantage, because I think that's more important was. And so if we look at the times we played in the regular season, our last win against the Warriors, which was the more convincing one, was at Golden State. So obviously falls in line with what I was saying. And so kind of that's my last point as far as moving forward goes. Series is 1-1, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Rockets won both games on the road, and then kind of struggled a little bit to close out the series because of how young they are. That wouldn't surprise me. I hope it doesn't happen. But just moving forward, before we talk about all of the good things and all of the bad things about the series so far, I'm actually more optimistic than most about the 2 road games coming ahead.
Well, and I would go the other direction simply based on recent Rockets history. So you can look back at that Rockets Clippers series from 10 years ago when Houston won in 7 games. And to me, that's why home court is so important. And that was a relatively young Rockets team early in the Harden era. Where the value of home court really comes into play is late in a series. Those pivotal game 5, if the series is tied at 2, game 7, obviously, where you oftentimes get a friendlier whistle. If you look back at that Rockets Clippers series, which I thought a little bit about this week because it went the same way, Rockets losing at home game 1, winning at game 2 to tie the series. They then lost the next 2 at LA by 25 plus points each. Now, I do not expect that to happen this weekend in San Francisco. I'm not saying I expect that to be the case. I think even if they lose, the games will be much more competitive because of the level of defense this team consistently plays with. But even if you're down 3-1, you still are only 1 game off serve, if you will. And the other team is only going to have one chance to close you out at home, and that's the game 6. So the ideal scenario is obviously the Rockets go in and win one, if not both, and close out the series as soon as possible. But even in the worst case world, where you go down 3-1, 3-1 is not as damaging as it sounds if you're the team that has 2 of the final 3 at home, because you only force one, or you only face one potential closeout game on the road. And so it just leaves you many more options. And that's where home court advantage really comes into play. It's not so much that you expect to win every single home game or an Astros like situation where it's the opposite. No, it's not that. It's more the big swing games late in a series, games 5 through 7. More of those are in Houston. They give you more options. And so that's where, to me, it could have an impact. I see your point on Jalen specifically being better on the road. And so for the balance of the series, perhaps the Rockets are better off away from Houston. I think this is not a team that's going to get rattled by the crowd in San Francisco being mean to them. If anything, they might feed off of that. But I think in terms of the benefits of playing in Houston, they would show up disproportionately as the series gets deeper and as the games get bigger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I do agree that perhaps my point maybe works if all games were just the same, right? If we were just talking about, we're playing 20 games and all of them have the same worth. I think my argument would hold more water than it does in real life. And I do kind of lean towards agreeing with you as far as, yes, the important games that you can't really treat them as the average or treat them the same as the average you would get over a larger sample size. So yeah, I do agree that perhaps in that sense, it's probably better to play them at home.
And also, let's talk about the officiating because everybody on both sides of this series is talking about it today. Rockets fans, obviously, we think it hasn't been in our favor. Warriors fans think the opposite. But I think what's really noteworthy about this, we can quibble over just how bad it's been and exactly what direction it's biased to, but it doesn't feel like the home crowd, and the fans at Toyota Center have been incredible, by the way, has been that impactful in terms of influencing the referee decisions. Like, there were 2 especially controversial ones in the second half of game 2 with the Jalen Green flagrant foul on the Draymond flop, the Fred VanVleet 3 that was taken away on replay because they said he kicked his leg out. Also, they said, Steph Curry pretty much tackled Dylan Brooks on a 3, and somehow it was an offensive foul on Dylan, his 4th. I bring up those examples to say, I don't think that just because the Warriors are at home, that they're necessarily going to get every single call. Now, there's certainly going to be some that go their way. And Ime Udoka has, if you listen to the audio, because he's mic'd up in a lot of these games of him talking to his players in timeouts, he's telling them, don't focus on the refs, do what you've got to do. And that's the right approach. You can't emotionally get too high or too low based on, the act of God that is NBA officiating. But from what I've seen so far, and I could be wrong, we know how refs historically are with the Rockets and the Warriors, but it doesn't feel like that just because these next 2 games are in San Francisco, that they're necessarily going to get every single call. I would say the officiating has been bad, There's certainly evidence that both fan bases can point to of things that should be corrected. And anybody who follows me on Twitter knows I'm not standing for NBA officials at all. I totally get it. But in terms of predictive value, the next two games, I'm not going in necessarily expecting the Rockets to be like a -20 differential in terms of net points based on officiating. Like, it feels like these guys, they're bad, but they're more randomly bad. And so if you're the road team, that might be to your benefit. I guess what I'm trying to get to, the bottom line, it doesn't feel like the home team in this series necessarily has a huge edge with the officiating. So from that perspective, while the Rockets they shouldn't bank on getting a super friendly whistle, I don't think they're necessarily going to get a horrible one either in these two games coming up in San Francisco. What's your perspective on what we've seen officiating wise and your expectations for the next two?
Yeah, let's just open that can of worms, right? As far as officiating, I think there's a lot of things we have to talk about. I think when you talk about officiating, obviously you're going to have to talk about Draymond, and you're going to have to talk about the Amen Butler foul, and you're going to have to talk about obviously the physicality. I think it's been a trend in these playoffs that there's been more physicality allowed than I think even in typical playoff series, and everybody's saying, "Oh, that's just the playoffs." It's been more than it's been allowed in the past, which I love, right? And it fits our play style much better.
And it's not just this series, so it's pretty clear that it's not randomness. It's not who the Rockets drew in terms of officials. It's across the board, and that probably should benefit the Rockets to some degree.
Yeah, and which makes me want to talk about a bunch of specific cases that I'm just that kind of piss me off. First of all, the entire clip of Ime Udoka saying they aren't going to call anything, so play physical. Like, listen, dude. Nobody told Ime Udoka prior to the game and said, "Hey, we're not going to call anything. You can foul as much as you want. And this is a big conspiracy theory, and you just leaked it on this clip that you know you were being recorded on." Like, dude,
That's
it
ridiculous.
was very clear. Warriors fans are treating it like this. Dude, it was very clearly, I don't remember what part of the game this was on, but Ime Udoka noticed, okay, they're letting us play, so go out there and play physical and test the limits. Like, go out there and play to our strengths. It's very clearly that, and not, oh my God, they told me they aren't going to call anything and the Warriors don't know this. Like, that's just insane. Second of all, I think it's to the Rockets' interest to, even if the refs start calling more fouls, to be physical anyways. See where it can take you. If like, and this is a bit extreme from me, but if guys foul out, guys foul out. If you reach the end of a game and you have Dylan Brooks fouled out, the man Thompson fouled out, Tari Eason fouled out, fine. Let's see how the NBA reacts to a game in which you fouled out a bunch of guys. And let me tell you, once you get to 3 or 4 fouls, the rest are gonna start swallowing their whistle because they don't want to be the ref crew that threw out 3 or 4 players from the same team.
And we actually saw that in game 2. Amen and Dylan got 3 fouls in the first half, and they didn't come that close to fouling out in the second half.
Yeah, because listen, that's not what the NBA wants. And then which leads me to another rant that I want to have, which is I am so sick and tired of Warriors fans victimizing themselves. Like, I know they have what's it called, the main character syndrome, which I think it's what I usually call it, of the NBA. They think that everything's about them. Listen, Steph Curry is being hugged on these screens. At the same time, the refs are allowing your guys to set the most insane moving screens as they always have. The only difference now is that typically you get away with it and there's no counterpunch. And now that they're allowing physicality, your moving screens are actually kind of fair because they're allowing it from both sides. It's physicality. They're allowing it. That's fine. Now it's an even playing field for your entire existence as basketball fans, because we know none of you were fans before the Warriors. You have been favored for your entire existence.
Also in game 1, those clips that went viral of Steph's defense on Jalen and attributing that to Jalen having a bad night, Steph was fouling him. The Rockets know he's a mismatch, but he's not as much of a mismatch if he can be handsy and bump a little bit to overcome his lack of size and physicality. But the refs were allowing it, and that's fine. That's the playoffs. I get it. but then you can't turn around and cry on the other end. That's the quote that Ime had post-game. If it happens for you on one end, you can't turn around and cry on the other. And Warriors fans, they want the best of playoff physicality on one end, but they want the regular season rules on the other, and that's just not how it works.
Yeah, 100%. And if you go to the specific clip that everybody's talking about, the one where Steph makes a three and Fred VanVleet's kind of touching him and he's like kind of leaning, trying to draw a weird foul, and everybody's saying that, oh, that should have been a 3-and-1. Listen, dude, if you look at that exact clip, that is not a single group of more than 3 frames in which Kevon Looney is standing in the same place. Like, he is moving throughout the entire clip. He starts moving once before Steph comes to him, and he's still moving by the time Steph's shooting the ball. Like, it's one of the most insane moving screens I had ever seen. Like, he's driving into Fred VanVleet's body as Steph is shooting. Like, it's not like that clip does not show what you think that clip's showing. And this isn't, and besides that, I actually don't even hate the whistle on specific plays or over the course of the game. The whistle I'm currently hating is that Draymond gets to poke every single bear and nobody can poke Draymond. Like,
Right.
last game in specific was insane. Like, Dylan Brooks got the foul on it. A man Thompson got a foul on something insane where, a man has hands on Draymond. He's trying to fight through a screen, and Draymond kind of like throws his hands up and throws a man like that. That's just insane, overly aggressive Draymond type shit. It makes no sense that even within more physical rules, every benefit of the doubt goes to Draymond. Like, he's legitimately the player I hate the most ever since I started watching basketball. The double standard's insane. The hypocrisy is insane from him and from the rest of the Warriors. Like, this is the dirtiest player I have ever seen in my entire life. It's not Zaza. It's not whoever you want. It's obviously not Dylan Brooks. I don't know how Nick Wright got that one. It's not. I'm even trying to think about. It's not Grayson Allen. It's none of these guys. It's literally Draymond Green. You can put out a highlight reel. Like, you can put out a bigger highlight reel of him, of dirty plays of him, that you can just have a highlight reel in general of him at all. Even if you include defense. Like, it's insane, and that's going to keep being an issue, but I actually kind of don't hate it because that fuels our team. And we've seen throughout the season, these types of things fuel our team. This is a team that thrives on that negativity. This is a team that thrives on that confrontation. And I think as these games go along, the other problem for the Warriors is Draymond has a lot of guys he has to pick fights with, try and foul one out. Like, let's imagine in any given game, Dylan Brooks gets thrown out by a weird. He gets ejected, not thrown out and ejected, basically the same thing. But on a fight with Draymond Green, guess what? You're still screwed. We still have Tari Eason, Aman Thompson, even Jalen Green's been playing great defense all series. We'll get into the specifics, as we go on to the pod. But guess what? This is not a contender paying max money to 3 stars and has one good role player that can guard Steph Curry. This is not Marcus Smart and the Celtics. This is not I guess the Thunder they have a lot of good defenders as well. But this is not one of those this is not PJ Tucker back on those Rockets teams. Like, this is not your one good perimeter defender. The Rockets have a lot to throw at you. If you wanna risk getting yourself thrown out, I guarantee you, it's a much bigger loss for the Warriors to lose you than it is for the Rockets to lose any individual of these guys out there that are playing great defense on you. So, just as far as officiating goes, I don't think it's been that egregious. I think there's been some bad calls going both ways. I think it's just been incredibly lopsided on all of the kind of skirmish type things between Draymond and the guys, where Draymond just gets the benefit of the doubt every single time. Besides that, I can't really complain. They have off physicality. Jalen Green was getting roughed up, obviously. Alperen Sengun is getting bodied up in the post. Obviously, you're playing physical, but on the other side, we are getting to hug Steph, and even Jimmy Butler haven't been shooting the amount of free throws he typically shoots, and they're allowing us to play physical on him. There's a specific play on my mind. I think it was actually early game 2 where Jimmy just kind of tries to bait a foul and goes up for a mid-range shot, and this is kind of a 12-footer where he goes up for the mid-range shot and he's clearly trying to draw a foul. The ref doesn't call it, and he airballs a maybe, which is kind of unheard of for Jimmy. So they're they're not even calling those obvious calls. I do think that there's been both ways some 3-point landing area calls that should have, especially for Jalen last game. I think Jalen had like a couple of them where I'm like, well, dude, he made one of them and he missed the other, where they're clearly undercutting him. He's getting hacked up top.
Clay
It's not
Thompson
just,
special.
yeah, it's
James
not,
Harden. Yeah.
it's not hand to hand. It's the entire arm. Like he's shooting, and after he shoots, his arm's getting hit. Like it's not hand to hand. They're not high fiving. But anyways, I didn't even complain about that because I understand that they could have called a lot of other stuff on the other side as well. It's just the managing of Draymond Green's temper that's been triggering me, especially because, listen, dude, I live terrified every single game that he's gonna hurt someone seriously, and it's been that way forever, regular season and all. I always hate playing the Warriors because I never know how the team's gonna look like at the end of the game. The only parallel I can kind of make to it is how terrified I was when the Texans were going to play against the Jets in New York. It's like
On the surface.
yeah. I'm like, listen, I'm terrified that these guys are gonna get hurt. I'd rather just forfeit the goddamn game and nobody gets hurt. Saw how it happened with the Texans. We saw Draymond injure KPJ a couple of seasons ago. Like I truly think we're going to beat the Warriors in 6. Please
by
do
the
not
way-
take out any of our players.
By the way, the elephant in the room is obviously the injury that did happen. We'll see as far as the severity, Jimmy Butler. But I mean, first off, the folks blaming him in are just absolutely silly. There's nothing malicious about that at all. And if you look at the overhead view, if you look at when the action actually started, Amin is going down before Butler has even committed to going in the air for that ball. There's contact from both Draymond and Steven Adams on Amin's leg. And you can argue, what's funny about this, people are trying to tie it into the whole narrative on physicality. I would actually argue that it's the reverse. They were so tight with the whistle early in the game, and that's part of the frustration, is that it feels like sometimes from quarter to quarter, half to half, they let them play sometimes, then they tighten up, or vice versa. Early in the game, both the men and Dylan had 2 fouls. Both teams were in the bonus. And so I think when the men felt that contact, he went down thinking that it would get 2 free throws for the Rockets. Just as fate would have it, he ended up going into Jimmy's leg. He wasn't even looking when he went down, and Jimmy went up to try and secure the ball, and that made the fall all the more brutal. And so just, wrong place, wrong time, bad luck. Rockets fans understand it. Just all you need to say is Chris Paul 2018, and everyone knows this is competitive sports. This stuff can happen. So there's nothing dirty with that play at all. I think, if anything, you could argue that maybe Amin was selling it a little bit too much to get a foul and that he went down a little too easily. But the Warriors fans aren't complaining when it happens on the other end, and their guys are getting fouls, and Amin and Dylan are in foul trouble. So this just sort of comes with the territory. And as far as Butler moving forward, again, we're recording this late Thursday night. We have not gotten clarification just yet. My guess is that unless it's really severe, he's going to play because he's a gamer. But honestly, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think you've got to be very careful in extrapolating the minutes with Butler to the minutes without Butler from game 2, because I think there were a lot of advantages the Warriors had after Jimmy went out. The Rockets had not seen Jonathan Kuminga or Pat Spencer yet. And so they did some things that were very difficult or very different from what the Warriors role players did in game 1. And so now they aren't the shiny new toys. The Rockets have seen them. They will game plan for them. Also, the Warriors shot really well from 3 in game 2 on high volume, 17 of 43, basically 40% on 43 attempts. That's as good as you can reasonably expect, even for a team with Steph Curry. So while they'll be better with Jimmy back, I don't think the shooting from game 2 is sustainable. It also might be aided a little bit by the fact that the Rockets playing with a 15, 20-point lead didn't have quite the intensity they usually do simply because of the huge advantage and being in strong position to win the game no matter what. And then when Jimmy does come back, again, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't play, but if he's 80% instead of 100%, that could be a pretty big difference. And so I wanted to touch on the Butler play and get your thoughts on, not just what happened, because clearly it's a talking point in these 2 off days between game 2 and game 3, but also the implications of potentially having a limited Butler moving forward. Because, him coming back, yeah, it'll affect the game some. Sure, he's still a very good player. Playoff Jimmy is a thing. He was very good in game 1. It makes it harder to trap Steph Curry aggressively when Jimmy's out there, and that played into Steph having 6 turnovers in game 2. Butler coming back, assuming he does, would help them some, but I don't think it would be as dramatic as a lot of Warriors fans will want to think, because you look at that game 2 offensive output, and even with the hot shooting, they still only scored 94 points. There's a lot that goes into how the Warriors are likely to perform in game 3 and game 4. Should also mention, by the way, the Rockets have very recent experience playing in San Francisco earlier this month. That game they won by 10 on April 6th. So Jimmy Butler coming back, assuming he does, would help the Warriors. I hope he does. You don't want to see anyone get hurt. It wasn't a malicious play, but don't want to see anyone injured nonetheless. I would love to beat the Warriors at full strength. But I guess, number one, it remains to be seen exactly what version of Jimmy the Warriors have if he comes back. And 2, assuming he does, I don't know relative to game 2 that it would be quite as drastic as the narrative will have you believe, based on how well the Warriors shot the ball in game 2 and based on the fact that the Rockets had not accounted for some of the role players that went in, Spencer and Kuminga chiefly among them, in a way that's going to be different as the series moves along.
So as far as the Eman Butler thing, it's just completely blown out of proportion by just Warriors fans. Like I was on Reddit seeing the reactions from other teams fans. Everybody agrees it's not a dirty play. Obviously, it's both not a dirty play, and Draymond didn't push Eman Thompson into Butler, which is kind of the two extremes. Like there's people saying Eman's dirty, and there's people saying, Draymond's dirtiness came back to haunt him. It's neither. Steven Adams is boxing out, and someone, I can't remember who, was boxing up Adams. Whoever's boxing up Adams is pushing him backwards, which pushes him into Eman Thompson.
I think it was Pods. Yeah. Adams pushing you, odds are fighting for position, and then Adams touches Draymond. It's just a chain reaction. And Amit might have gone down a little bit easily to try and get the foul, but there's nothing malicious there at all.
Listen, I don't even agree with that. I think obviously Adams is pushing Eman to the side, and then Eman's kind of pincered between Adams' body and Draymond's leg, which is in front of him. And if you and he tries to jump, and when he jumps, he just completely loses control. Like if you were to make a dirty foul, he would not foul him with his face. Like it's just insane. And so yeah, it's just unfortunate, obviously. But as far as moving forward, there's an argument to be made that an 80% Jimmy Butler is actually probably not better than no Jimmy Butler. I'm gonna say this, and maybe he's gonna drop 40 on us. But there's an argument to be made because we have the defenders, and if Jimmy's not 100% being able to being physical, and he doesn't have the burst, because Jimmy's game is a lot about angles, and when you look at the guys from our team that defend him, it's actually curious because it's pretty consistent who's able to stop him and who isn't. A man can stop him, Dylan can stop him, even Sengun can stop him. And those guys are kind of probably our smartest defenders from an angle standpoint. The guy who can't seem to stop him is Tari Eason, who is a guy who relies a lot more on length and effort rather than approaching, the one-on-one defense from a correct positioning standpoint. He relies on his length a lot to recover, and his quickness, but he gives up angles a little bit too easily, and that's why I think Jimmy has probably an easier time scoring on him than any of the other three, including Chingo, who I'm going to get into. And so if he doesn't have that burst, that's one more guy that can defend him. Even Fred VanVleet does a solid job on Jimmy, at least stopping him and bumping him off his spot early on and allowing help to come. It's probably mainly because of that. It's just understanding angles, and Butler only needs to get a shoulder in, on the right spot to get enough, leverage to go up for a shot and make a layup. And so from that perspective, I think 80% to me, Butler might not even be
it's not a drastic upgrade on what we saw in game 2.
Yeah, because Kuminga typically does really well against us, and he didn't last game, and he's obviously not in form because they stat him a bunch. But it still scares me because he is that type of tough shot maker with a lot more speed than Jimmy has, and if he's hot and his willingness to shoot threes up as well, it kind of scares me the variance there, right? Because Steph Curry can keep you in a game, and if you have Kuminga as the X factor, uh, you know, and that kind of, I'm not necessarily scared, but I'm wary of it. So yeah, as far as Jimmy, that's what I'm at.
As far as the Rockets, because we've talked about a lot of the Warriors players and how Houston has defended them, which that's been the most consistent element of the first 2 games, and really the entire Rockets Warriors season series, going back through the 5 regular season ones as well. We now have a 7-game sample, and the Rockets have defended them at an elite level. So that's the story. That's when we're talking about what they do against Steph, what they do against Jimmy if he plays, what the Warriors shooting looks like, what their alternatives are, how limited these role players are. By the way, Pods with the food poisoning, he could be better than game 2, but it's not like he was all that impactful in game 1. So I don't necessarily view his return, unless he has a hot shooting game, as being that meaningful. But I mean, the caveat of if he has a hot shooting game quite literally applies to anybody. So we're talking more about defense because that's where the Rockets, that's their primary advantage this season. And if they win this series, that's probably where they're going to do it. I guess defense and rebounding, there's often an overlap there. And that leads me into the storyline I want to get into from an individual Rockets perspective, which is Alperen Sengun. Look, game 1, the stats were there. The team result wasn't. Obviously, it wasn't his fault, but 26 points, 9 rebounds, over 60% shooting. The one question was, hey, was some of the defense, the Warriors sort of giving up the one-on-ones and letting him cook Draymond at times to prevent getting threes? And we saw in game 2, not really. It just took the Rockets making a few more of those threes and Jalen getting in rhythm. And next thing you know, he's got 18 attempts and he's doing it on good efficiency as well, because I don't think the Warriors dramatically changed up their coverages from one game to the next. The Rockets just needed a couple of guys to get in rhythm. And I bring up that context to say Sengun has been excellent, and I don't see any reason to think that it's going to change. My biggest source of optimism going into this series, I said it on our preview pod last week, I think it's a good matchup for Alperen Sengun. I don't think it's a great matchup because certainly the Warriors, the Draymond at the 5 and the spacing, there's some things they do that, especially when the Rockets play double big and want to go zone with the Warriors having Steph in the game, that can be problematic. But the Rockets and Sengun specifically are just so dialed in on everything the Warriors want to do on both ends of the court. They have played each other so much this year, and in high leverage situations, there's no element of surprise. Alperen Sengun knows what he wants to do. He knows what he needs to do. And so because of that, I don't have any concerns about how it's going to translate on the road. I trust him, assuming he's not in foul trouble in this matchup, and he hasn't been in foul trouble really in either game. And I think these first 2 games, first off, give the guy his flowers. He's stepping up. And even though the efficiency wasn't quite there in game 2, he didn't finish quite as well. The Rockets were plus 28 in his 37 minutes, and he led the team with 16 boards, and the Rockets are out rebounding the Warriors by an average of 15 in each game. We expected that to be the case. It is holding up, and that's a big part of the formula for how the Rockets continue to limit the Warriors to mid-90s in scoring. And really all I need to do is score 100 plus and have one guy go off. In game 2, it was Jalen, and that's probably going to be enough to win because of the defense, but also because of the rebounding. And Sengun's leading the rebounding, but he's, having a vital role defensively as well. Certainly one-on-one defense against Draymond Green a lot of the time, but the rebounding is correlated with the defense as well. And just overall, Sengun has played at a very, very high level this series. He's played like an all-star. He's stepped up in the playoffs, and that's exactly what you want to see from your young guys as you try and learn about them. You stress test them under the bright lights, as we've talked about all year. But the thing with Sengun that stands out the most to me, and perhaps we should have seen it coming, the questions that have always been there about the defense and how he's going to hold up in a playoff setting, as long as he embraces the moment. And I think that's always been the case with Sengun. If you pay attention, he gets up for these primetime games. He has that competitive streak to him. The focus is going to be there. And even if teams hunt you a little bit more, which at times the Warriors have tried to do in this series, and if the Rockets are fortunate enough to advance, I'm sure other teams will as well. It's offset by the fact that unlike the 82 game grind, he is fully dialed in on the defensive end. And some of this, let's be clear, 82 games is a marathon, and what's asked of modern NBA big men is incredible. So some of these limitations defensively, some of it's just his player archetype, but also modern NBA bigs. There's matchups, and often in the same game, where you have to bang with big men, and you also have to go out on the perimeter and defend in space. And sometimes it varies from one possession to the next. So, especially at the center position, it's very rare that you have a player that you don't worry about in the regular season from time to time, especially because there's so many games. You have these stretches with 3 and 4 nights, 5 and 7, and everybody takes a few possessions off. And so, especially for a guy at that position, and keep in mind, we haven't seen the Rockets in the playoffs before, so the regular season is all we have to go on. It's easy to wonder, is this guy going to be, Domantas Sabonis, Karl Anthony Towns, insert defensively limited big man here who, raises your floor but has a clear ceiling. I know it's just 2 games, but it feels like defensively he's at a different level than those guys. He is capable of more. A lot of it comes down to focus, and, he's the one guy for the Rockets that when the series shifts next week to every other day instead of, the big gap between games, you do worry about that dynamic a little bit. But I just think that the one question with him, how is he going to hold up in the playoffs? It's been offset and then some by the fact that he's just so much more dialed in defensively. The focus is there. He's not a defensive liability. Offensively, we know what he does as a scorer, as a playmaker, and I could not be impressed. Could not be more impressed, excuse me, by what he's done in these 2 games. Game 1, it speaks for itself, and game 2, plus 28 in 37 minutes. That's just phenomenal. So, Alperen Sengun, let's give the guy his flowers. To me, Jalen Green is the ceiling raiser, and he did some things in game 2 that were really special and no one else on this team can do. But Alperen Sengun, to me, he's been the MVP for the Rockets and really the MVP of this series through 2 games, right?
To me, and obviously this is subject to how the next few games go, but this completely changes the outlook for Alperen Sengun for me. And and then people who follow the pod know that the biggest question with Alperen Sengun for me was always going to be, how does his defense fare in the playoffs? It's been that for a long time. There's you obviously have the 2 extremes. You have Jokic, who's the best player in the world, and you have Sabonis, who is an all-star, who's just useless in the playoffs. And I've been saying that Sengun's better than Sabonis for a while now, since the Kings lost that series to the Warriors. I did not, even the most optimistic version of me, did not expect Alperen Sengun to be as good defensively as he was. He has been absolutely elite. To me, he has been a better defender this postseason than Tyrese, for example. He's probably been, behind the men and maybe Dylan, the best defender I've seen on the court for us this postseason. That's how good he's been. He's been tasked with playing the toughest role on offense. He's been tasked with judging when to stunt, when to blitz, when to play drop, when to full out switch. He's done all of them at an excellent level. He has times where he's been on an island with Jimmy Butler and he's just guarded him. He has been able, obviously Jimmy's kind of easier for the center because he doesn't really have the pull-up 3 potential, but he has been shooting the 3 in this series. The Warriors, being a small team, kind of test you in the perfect way to test Alperen Sengun's defensive ability, which is they're playing small. They're spreading the floor. Alperen Sengun is being asked to run around a lot and to make snap decisions basically all the time defensively. And the way he has answered has been absolutely insane. It, to me, completely changes the outlook on Alperen Sengun. That, combined with this performance offensively that I'll get into after talking about his defense, is just makes it so, to me, he is probably, and obviously a man was this for me before, clearly the 1A guy, the guy you build around. This guy is not a liability defensively. We'll see how he does against bigger bigs as far as teams that get more downhill and how he will do as far as protecting the rim. But he has genuinely made me confident that it is genuinely possible to play him at the 4 in the playoffs. Obviously, in the regular season, you don't want to do that because you don't want this strain on him mentally and physically over an 82 game season, as you pointed out, rightly so. But I think I would be comfortable with him. That's how good he's been. I would be confident with him playing the 4 so much so that even if he struggles in the second round series against the Wolves with Gobert, for example, although Gobert is really, really limited offensively, it makes me confident enough that worst case scenario, you'll play a big next to him and he'll be more than fine. Like that's the level of ability on the perimeter that he's shown to me defensively. Like complete kind of paradigm changer for Alperen Sengun. And then offensively, he has just been fearless. Like actually insane. He has a few turnovers, but they're not turnovers from brain dead plays. The turnovers he has is when he's trying to post up Draymond and Draymond kind of shoves them and he loses control of the ball. Like that's just Draymond. That's not going to happen against other teams. And besides that, the playoff shot for him is the floater, and the floater has been going in at an incredibly good rate. And I know people can argue that the field goal percentage in the second game isn't the best. The field goal percentage in the second game is insanely flawed stat because there's one play where in tip tries, he has 4 misses in the make. And so in that one play, if you take those away, he had I think 6 of 11 shooting game, which is foul. So his efficiency is obviously tanked in this 2-game sample size, but in game 1, nobody had it going. Nobody. And it wasn't like he was scorching hot. He was just willing the Rockets back into the game and willing the Rockets to not be down by more than what they were at those points. It really felt like a superstar moment where nobody else on this team has it, and he was dragging us, keeping us close, the same way Steph Curry was doing for the Warriors in Game 2. If the Warriors had any chance of a comeback, it was because of Steph Curry, and they only were able to put us away in Game 1 because of Steph Curry. That was what Alperen Sengun was doing for us. He had everything going. The Warriors are a team that give him trouble, and it is very intentional for him the way he is playing. It's not circumstance. It's not what the Warriors are willing to give up. No, it's what he is forcing them to take. Like he is imposing his will offensively, and it's magnificent. It's magnificent to see. Like he is our star player. He has been these 2 games. And to me, there are no questions. He's obviously made 2 threes, which is kind of insane, out of 4 attempts or something close to it. But to me, that's not even a question. Like he has not left a single question to be answered throughout these 2 games. And if this keeps up going forward against a team that's basically built in a lab to test his limitations or his supposed limitations defensively, I could not be happier with how Alperen Sengun has played. Clearly the best player across the 2 games. Even in the second game where he had, I think, 17 and 17. Even in that game where Jalen Green was clearly the star because he had 38 points, he was probably 95% as impactful as Jalen was, as good as Jalen was. That's how important his defense is for us. And I think, I honestly think if you put Jabari, I honestly think playing small ball with Jabari at the 5 right now is the worst look defensively against a small ball team like the Warriors than it is to play with Alperen Sengun. I genuinely think Sengun is making better decisions than what Jabari would have made in his position with much better physical tools. I think that's the biggest testament that I can make to how well he's playing defensively. I would literally rather play him than a small ball 5 when playing a small ball team. That's how good he's been. So yeah, and that's just I do not have the words. I do not speak English well enough to describe how proud I am of Alperen Sengun and how good he has been and how much he's proven to me through these two games. And I hope and I'm confident that he will continue to do so the rest of the series and on if we make it to the second round.
And his ability to play at the four is so important too, because Steven Adams as an offensive rebounder is just so vital for a team that has the shooting limitations. You nearly stole game one, even with everything going wrong, in large part because of Steven Adams. And that only works for an extended stretch if you can run Sengun at the four as well and still have his offensive ability to be an engine, a hub for this team. You need Steven Adams as something of a, an offset for the poor shooting, in that even if you're not shooting the ball well, if you get 2-3 opportunities per possession, eventually you should make one. And so that's why in the macro, Steven Adams is so important, but you need the versatility from Alperen Sengun to enable that, and he has shown that and then some. As we wind down the pod, I want to transition to obviously talking about Jalen and what changed between game one and game two. Certainly some of it is just the make shots adjustment that Ime Udoka said before game two. A lot of shots they missed in game one went in Wednesday's game two. But I also think, and this will make for sort of a natural transition, the two big adjustments that I saw, part of it was Sengun facilitating more. We saw Sengun get his teammates involved more in game two, not because he changed his approach, but because the Rockets were playing with a lead, it wasn't as easy for the Rockets, or for the Warriors, to concede the one-on-one opportunities. And so game one, we saw Sengun cooking, but it was tough, especially with Curry making threes, to catch back up with Sengun largely making twos. But if you're playing from level or in front, you don't want Alperen Sengun to get going, so you're going to commit a few more resources, and that's going to get more ball movement, and that's going to benefit everyone. And certainly Jalen Green was one of the big beneficiaries in game two, and it's reflected in the box score. Sengun had 1 assist in game one, 7 assists in game two. Don't think his approach changed that much. It's just the Warriors defended a little bit differently because they were trailing, and that naturally opened up more opportunities. So I think, playing from in front is a big benefit to any NBA team. I think it's especially so for one that has offensive limitations like this one. I think that worked to Jalen's benefit. And the other, I think the higher pace, even with the Rockets in the fourth quarter trying to sort of dribble the air out of the ball because they had a comfortable lead late in the game, they still had 95 possessions in game two, which is slow for the season as a whole, but it's a decent bit faster than their 89 in game one. And again, I think the 95 probably would have been 97, 98 if the fourth quarter had been more normal, in the sense that the Rockets hadn't been just trying to burn clock with a huge lead, knowing that they had the game in the bag unless they do something stupid. So it was a decent bit faster in game two, a lot of it because they didn't wait until the final 5, 6, 7 seconds of the shot clock to make their move, which sort of boxes you in because there's only so many things you can do. There's only so many passes you can make when the clock is winding down. Instead, when you start your move with 10, 11, 12 seconds left, you have more options. There's more things the defense has to account for. And so that's what I saw from Jalen Green. He looked just more decisive is how I would phrase it. And obviously making shots helps with that. But I just think there was a clear tactical adjustment to go a little bit earlier. And some of it, he's feeling out the defense in the playoffs. There's just a constant game of adjusting to adjustments and so on and so forth. But I just thought, besides making more shots, that's the obvious. The two things that stood out to me for Jalen in game two would be benefiting from Sengun, which largely has to do with the Warriors defending a little bit differently since they're not playing with a huge lead. And so takeaway there, try to play from in front. It's easier said than done, but I think it's especially big for this team. And then secondly, the pace of play. I think, any transition opportunities are very important for the Rockets given their athleticism advantage. But beyond that, in the half court, there are degrees of bad. We know this is a below average offensive team in the half court. But if they get going a little bit earlier, that can make all the difference and give them more options, make the Warriors account for more things. I thought that was what really changed between game one and game two. I think the possession data reflects it, and I think that's something that needs to be a point of emphasis moving forward in game three on Saturday night and beyond. Paolo, what did you see as far as the changes for Jalen besides the obvious of more shots went in?
It seems obvious, but a large part of it was shots going in, and the second part was there was a clear shift in energy and in confidence from what Jalen did last game from compared to first game. First game he couldn't get by Steph Curry. First game he wouldn't call for screens. Basically all of his possessions were straight ISOs. First game he shot from memory maybe one step back three. In this game, he was a lot more comfortable. Obviously, had an early 3 day, and usually that helps him get going.
He had only 4
Besides,
attempts from 3 in game one, had 18 in game two, to your point.
and it felt like he was not forcing the issue driving to the paint, which, like it or not, is still a weakness for him. Finishing around the rim is a weakness. He's not strong enough, and the refs are not calling those fouls. And to Ime's credit, he did kind of set a little bit of a precedent by protecting Jalen and calling that challenge that gave Jalen those 2 free throws very early on. And to me, that was a mastermind move from Ime as well. But then besides that, to me, it was mostly just a confidence thing, and it felt like Jalen was relocating more on the perimeter. He got a lot of catch and shoot shots from it, and it felt to me like Jalen, like even in the first game, when Jalen was in the game, the Rockets were better offensively. If you look at the stats, even though he wasn't making any shots, because the way the Warriors defend, they are giving Jalen a lot of attention, and having Jalen on by itself because he creates that level of kind of disturbance in the Warriors' defense is a benefit. But you need him to be making those shots, and he was making shots this time around. Because if he's not in the game, and if you have to take him out, even if you put Aaron Holiday in, they're not going to respect him as much. They're going to play a lot more one-on-one. They're going to play, and they're not going to help and overreact as much. And when someone's playing confident, even if the shots aren't going in, there's 2 possible options, right? If he's playing confident and he's getting those shots and he's missing them, it's probably best for the Rockets to let him play through those misses, because the offense without him just doesn't work. If you're playing, even if you're playing Sengun, Amen, Fred VanVleet, Tyrese, and then Dillon Brooks, unless Dillon's really hot from 3 or has the scoring going, which
And by the way, Dylan did have some big half-court buckets last night, ISO creations that felt like the Warriors were getting a little bit closer that sort of kept them at bay. Sorry for interjecting. Just wanted to highlight that with Dylan.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I absolutely agree. But we need a player that's warping the defense, and Jalen is doing that. Whether you like him or not, when you watch the games, you can tell that there's a difference when he's on the court versus when he isn't, even if the shot isn't going down. Just the way the offensive possessions play out. But that being said, I think he was making like great reads. He was on. I don't think he forced a single shot. Maybe one shot was forced. He was taking good shots. You have to adjust your meter for what a good shot is to a playoff setting, right? To what the games are. You can't have one standard and apply it across the board here. So to me, a step back 3 from Jalen in this context where nobody can score, it's probably a good shot. If he's making them at even a 33% rate, probably a good shot. These games are barely scratching 100 points. The Warriors haven't scratched 100 points yet. And so it's just you need Jalen to keep playing with that level of confidence. And I wanted to mention something just so we don't just talk about Jalen and Alperen. Jalen was awesome, right? I guess I will say one more thing on Jalen. Sorry for the confusion, which is the game he had last night wasn't just a normal Jalen pop-off game. And it might sound ridiculous, but Jalen had probably his best game as a Rocket in the playoffs in an absolutely must-win game.
He defended. He had 6 assists. He did everything. The hustle, everything you could possibly want.
Yes, but something that I really want to hammer home. The Rockets could not, under any circumstance, lose that game. The series is over.
Yeah.
If they lose that
Ton of pressure. Yeah.
Like, they're not like, if they lose that game, they're going to be extremely nervous going into game 3. We saw how game 1 went, where when they were nervous at home or away at Golden State, if you lose, you're just 100% out. This game was a must win. This game was the most important game Jalen has played in his entire life. It was also the best game Jalen has played this entire life. And I cannot emphasize enough for both him and Sengun how kind of encouraging that is, especially, I'm not going to get into into James Harden and how he underperformed in the playoffs or didn't. I think a lot of that talk is overdone because he was better than
Doesn't
what
matter.
people give him credit
It just
for.
doesn't matter anymore, bottom line.
Yeah, but what I was going to get into is I think you can't argue that James Harden had, as a Rocket, had his best game of his career in the playoffs. I would argue Harden was probably 90% of himself in the playoffs. What we just saw from Jalen Green was the best game of his career in the biggest game of his career, and it wasn't like some kind of they just don't
Just
know they're not
crazy
supposed
outlier.
to be there.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know they're not supposed to be there, so there's no pressure. No, we saw game one, the pressure was there. They were struggling with the pressure in game one, and in game two, they went complete. Jalen in specific, but Sengun obviously was just as good. But Jalen in specific went completely the other way. This was the biggest game of his career. He played the best game of his career in the biggest in the biggest stage that he has faced thus far. And to me, that is so important. Just because getting to the getting to the playoffs is hard, but it's a lot easier than having success in the playoffs. You know, you can live with Jalen being inconsistent for 82 games if in the biggest games he comes through in the playoffs. Like, I'm more than fine paying him max money or whatever he is making to be inconsistent in the regular season if I get to the playoffs and in the games I need him, he's there. Because that's really hard to find, especially from a star player. That from Jalen, and I apply that to Jalen as a kind of a boost to him as a player, as opposed to if he wasn't able to be this good, you'd have questions about, him becoming a star. On the other side of it, Alperen Sengun, it's not he performed in the most important game of his career. To me, with him, it's, well, he's had two important games and he's performed in both of them, and perhaps he's consistently good. Obviously, being consistently great is the best type of great, but if that's not possible, if you're great in the big moments, that goes a long way as well. That's what I'm trying to say, and that's what I am trying to get it at with Jalen, I guess.
All right, to finish out the pod, we can do quick hitters on other players throughout both rosters, really, just key variables as we shift to San Francisco for game 3 on Saturday and game 4 on Monday. For me, I said it going into the series, I'm still at some point, and maybe I'll go down with the ship, but I'm expecting Fred VanVleet to break out. He hasn't yet, but the shots have been there. Even in game 2, it wasn't nearly as glaring because he didn't take 13 threes. The volume wasn't there, but he still shot about 25% overall. I think low 20s from three, something along those lines. He's getting good shots. I watched him warm up. It's not like he's forgotten how to shoot. At some point, and perhaps on the road, we know he's delivered at Golden State in the past to close out game 6 of the 2019 finals. He's getting good shots. At some point, I think Fred's going to step up. He needs to. I don't think they can win 4 games with him playing at the level he has the first 2 games, but I think that's a lot of meat that's being left on the bone. Amen Thompson, he's got to get going at some point offensively. The defense has been there, but I think a lot of it just foul trouble. Game 1, there were definitely nerves. He didn't finish as well as he usually does. Game 2, he started off very well offensively, but he missed most of the first half, especially after picking up the third on that Jimmy sequence. And by the time he came back in the second half, you obviously weren't going to run too much through him when Jalen was clearly having a huge night and other guys were in rhythm. So the bottom line, through 2 games, we have not seen that much from Amen Thompson offensively. I think that's something that on the road we'll probably see a little bit more of. He's capable of more. And so that's why I'm pretty optimistic. You've got 2 guys, Fred and Amen, and I'm not saying there are reasons to panic. In both cases, the process is sound. But in terms of the results, there's meat that's left on the bone. Those are guys that I'm expecting to get a little bit more from on the road, even if, for one reason or another, Jalen and Sengun aren't quite as good as they were in these first 2 games. Well, second game in Jalen's case. As far as Golden State, I mentioned it a couple of times already, but one reason I'm not too phased when you worry about a team built like the Warriors, there's the old adage of role players shoot better at home. I don't know if that's going to apply because they made 17 threes. They shot the ball at a high level in game two, and yet they still scored just 94 points. So I'm not necessarily worried about the Quentin Post, Moses Moody types going off. What I do worry about is an all-time great in Steph having a quarter like he did in that regular season finale against the Clippers where he basically won it by himself, or the 2 threes that he had late in the play-in game against Memphis to get them to the 7 seed and this first round series with the Rockets. So Steph Curry, we know what the Rockets can do over the balance of 48 minutes with the men as the head of the snake, a little bit of Tari Eason, Dylan Brooks as well. But in high leverage moments with the crowd spurring him on, I do worry a little bit. Can the Rockets, we know they have to win at least one in San Francisco to win this series. Can they absorb a turbo nuclear button? That's our good buddy Stanford KP, Karthik Prasad. That's his expression. Can they survive a turbo nuclear stretch from Steph, which I think is a little bit more likely in that building in front of his own fans? That's the one variable that I'm most worried about. And I think it's true even if Jimmy Butler comes back. So those are my storylines. Paolo, what are you looking at? I'll leave it open-ended from both rosters, just quick hitting. Besides Jalen and Sengun, key storylines to watch, and I guess besides Jimmy as well, over these next couple of games in San Francisco.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to touch on the Curry thing. You know, heck, I want to try my luck here. But to me, it's felt like Steph has already been better than what he is supposed to be for the shots he's been able to
Agreed.
take. Yeah, to me, Steph has already, these 2 games, Steph has already been a superhero. The only problem is he's been a superhero because we have played defense on him that would have any normal player scoring under 15 points. And because he is Steph, he has scored the way he has scored. As long as the defense from Warren stays the same, I struggle to see Steph going off for 50. I think that's probably not impossible, but I think that's really, really unlikely.
And maybe he's the type of guy that would be hurt by the series as it gets deeper going to every other day. You know, one of the things you hear a lot about when we talk about the April 6th game where he had 3 points and 1 of 10 shooting is, oh, you know, he's a veteran and it was the third game in 4 nights for the Warriors and he was just out of juice and the Rockets were rested. Well, as the series gets deeper and you don't have these 2 days off in between games, and they had, I think, 4 days off going into game one, maybe it's a little bit more difficult even at home for him to find that extra gear when he doesn't have that recovery time between games that he's had between the first couple.
100%. And so my storylines going in, the 2 ways we lose the series is if they start calling touch fouls and we're sending Steph Curry to the line 15, 20 times a game. That's the type of consistent scoring that we just can't deal with. And if we can't play the level of defense that we have played on Steph, it completely changes the series. So ref criteria on fouls and on physicality is one thing that I'm scared about. Other than that, it's my X factor from the Warriors' standpoint is Kuminga. Kuminga's going to have to play here. Especially if they lose the next game, they're going to have to try something, some level of spark. And so I think Curry will probably try to implement Kuminga as, we got to try just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks type thing. And I guess I will mention to a lower level another X factor, and I called this before he went off in the second half. I called this during game one. Is Quentin Post? He is kind of the scheme breaker for us, for our defense, right? And if he is a 40% shooter on a high volume for a big, obviously in the regular season, he made a lot of threes last game. And you probably don't want to switch the way you're defending. You gotta hope he misses, and you gotta punish him on the other end because he's not a good defender whatsoever, and he fouls a lot. And you can exploit him. And even the Rockets, as struggling as they are in half court offense, I mean, they have more than enough tools to punish him being out there defensively. And then as far as the Rockets go, I'll touch on, obviously you have to touch on a man. I struggle to see a way to me, there's 2 ways in which a man can exceed himself going forward in the series. I don't think he's been that bad. I think the 2 ways that he hasn't shown us what he has been in the regular season is in generating turnovers and running the fast break. Him and Tari has not we've generated turnovers, but funnily enough, to me, it's mostly been Jalen and Dylan and Fred and Sengun, not necessarily the two guys that we're used to seeing generate those turnovers. So adding that boost, the terror screens boost to our offense, more so to our offense than to our defense, would be a key factor. So that's one of the ways the man can improve. And then the other is, it's just a massive swing if he can make mid-range shots. Against the Celtics in that game where he hit the game winner, yeah, that's the shot that he can generate against anybody at any time. If he has the touch going, which he hasn't up to this point, then that changes everything, because all of a sudden now you have a three-headed monster as far as generating shots goes. If you can give the ball to a man, you can give the ball to Jalen, you can give the ball to Sengun, and they can generate a shot that they can reliably make. For a man, that would be the mid-range shot, basically the only shot he can get at will. For Jalen, he can get any shot at will. It's about making them. And for Sengun, he's probably, unless, as long as Draymond's on the floor, he probably can't get all the way to the rim, but he can always get the hook shots and the floater game going. Apparently the threes as well. So obviously those are my two main storylines. And then besides that, it's just can Tari and Jabari punish people from the corner. So Jabari was huge. Tari was huge in game 2 as far as making those threes earlier on. And so that's another thing that I'm looking forward to going into game 3.
Yeah, I completely agree. Getting that separation, which Tari making those threes early allowed the Rockets to do, that was the difference. Game 1, the Rockets had a few minutes of playing with a lead, but they lost it in that 16-5 stretch with Curry on the bench and basically played from behind the rest of the way. And it really impacted, for both teams, the way the rest of the game played out, with the Warriors having a comfortable lead most of the way, as opposed to game 2 with the Rockets playing from in front. That really helps you offensively for a team that has limitations in the half court. If you aren't trying to play from behind, then it makes you less predictable. It makes the defense account for more things. It's good for Sengun. It's good for Jalen. It's good for everybody. A team like the Rockets that has limitations is much worse off if they are also predictable based on the score, based on having to play catch up and try to get threes at volume. It makes it much easier to squeeze them the way the Warriors did in game 1. I don't expect that to be the case moving forward, because I think a lot of things about game 1 were unsustainable. And at a bare minimum, as long as the Rockets are at least competitive in these games and close, and I have not seen anything that suggests the Warriors are capable of blowing the Rockets out, then I think it can make for a much more diversified approach for the Rockets that is much more difficult for Steve Kerr and the Warriors to defend. Anyway, that's where we'll wrap things for tonight, and we will be back early next week. We'll see either between game 3 and game 4, or between game 4 and game 5, but we'll have more insight as the series progresses. It will now at least go 5 games, with the series tied at 2 after the first 2 between the Warriors and the Rockets.
Travis Hunter, you're getting cooked by Nico Collins, and you're getting shut down by Derek Stingley. Have a good night.
There we go. And by the way, Nico Collins made the first shot of game 2. So things always look better when that celebrity first shot goes in. Nico went up there and he knew what he was doing. That's an athlete. And so, yeah, that set the right tone. And we got to make sure we get the appropriate Houston sports athlete out there for game 5, which is confirmed to take place next Wednesday night, April 30th. Thank goodness it will be a 6:30 start instead of an 8:45 start. That will hopefully make next week's pod a lot more linear. I think both Paolo and myself, being sleep deprived, have been a bit all over the board today. It's understandable based on when the game ended, even later for Paolo in Portugal. Not that much later relative to me, since I had to file a story copy after the game. Whatever the case, game 5 in Houston at 6:30, and the only super late game will be the game 4 at 9 o'clock Pacific time on Monday night. So that's a little thing to benefit from for Rockets fans over the next few weeks. Monday will be the only late night in this series. Game 2, well, it should have been a late night, but the Porzingis bleeding situation made the game start about 10 minutes later than it was expected to. And then all the replay reviews, all the trippy sequences made it to where game didn't end until after 11:30 local time. And you had the post game, and before you know it, I think all of Houston is on limited sleep today. So We'll try and get some rest, and hopefully the series having a few earlier games, Saturday being an ABC exclusive in the 7:30 slot, will help with, and perhaps that'll make these pods a little more concise, a little less rambly, although, of course, you guys know us, we'll always be rambly, at least to some extent. All right, that's where we'll wrap things for today, and if you want more content before our next show next week, the best place to get insight from us is online. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Ben Dubose, the show at The Logger Line, and Paolo at Paolo Alves NBA. And if you go to that Logger Line page, you can find our link tree that's got links to your distribution partners like Apple, Google, and Spotify. You can subscribe, leave positive review at your location of choice. Obviously, we would appreciate that. And also on that same link tree, you've got links to friends, sponsors, partners of the program, USA Today's Rockets Wire, Carbach Brewing, Sports Talk 790. Hit those links and you can enjoy their content as well. All right, with those plugs complete, we'll adjourn for tonight. For Paolo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for more new episodes of The Logger Line. Go Rockets, beat the Warriors.